Hi everyone, Woniya here, and it is August 28th, 2019. So it is just about a week after the finale of Alone Season 6, and it is about 3 days from when I left at this point last year to head out for my Arctic adventure. So now that the season is over, I can actually really talk about all that I went through physically and how that went for me. So I'm doing this in a 3-part series. So I want to first talk about the follow-up to those baseline and preparations videos and talk about how the preparations that I did last summer really served me during my time out. And then part 2 is going to be talking about what was going on with my body during my time out, from launch day to the day they came and picked me up. And then the third, of course, is my recovery process and what was going on for me from the moment they picked me up through right now, and what the process of coming back to full physical health has been. And wanted to just start by following up in the same outfit and in the same place, only shifted a little bit because of the sun, that I wore during my baseline video in May of 2018. So at that point, it was just before I launched into my preparations, and I said, this is my body as it is today, my baseline body before I start messing with things. So I was standing here, that was a year and 5 months ago. And here am I today, August 28th, 2019, after putting my body through quite a roller coaster in the last year, but wanted to show you that I am back to healthy and strong and well, and a couple minor lingering physical issues, but I managed it really well. And let that be a testament to the choice I made, putting my physical health first. I could have been way more poorly off than I am right now in my body, but I chose to leave at the right time, before I started to really go downhill, because I felt it coming. So more on all of this later, but this is my intro to letting you know that we are going to dive into all of the things that I went through physically, and it was, it was kind of a lot. So thanks for watching, folks, and let's go ahead and dive into part 1. How did those preparations serve me? So my regular practice of intermittent fasting for about 1.5 years before even being contacted by the Alone show, I felt like served me really, really well out there. So the reason I was doing intermittent fasting was because there are a lot of cellular repair processes that your body does for itself, but it doesn't do if it's actively digesting, because digesting is very expensive energetically for your body. So it doesn't have the extra resources to do these repair processes. So that's part of why I had been doing intermittent fasting. But another benefit of it is it gets your body used to the state of ketosis, because when you go a certain amount of time without eating carbohydrates, your body shifts into this other metabolic state called ketosis, where it's burning fats rather than carbohydrates for its energy. And when you're not eating carbohydrates, and when you're eating very little, like in long-term starvation scenarios, like I experienced last year, your body automatically goes into ketosis. Well, for a lot of people who aren't used to that, it can come with some really uncomfortable physical symptoms. They call it the keto flu. Some people are nauseous, headachy, feverish, really feel like they have the flu and feel really unwell. And, I wonder if that was part of what Nathan and Donnie were both experiencing, who were pretty ill in that first week. I don't think it was just that. I think that some of the things that they ate were also partly responsible, but I really wonder if it might have been upping the symptoms. So the beautiful thing for me about intermittent fasting is it meant that I didn't have any issues with going into ketosis out there. It was a really easy transition, and I didn't have any symptoms. Also, super key is intermittent fasting. It looks like either taking 1 day of the week and not eating at all that day, or the way I was doing it is only eating for 8 hours of the day. So say between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. and fasting for the other hours. That looks like feeling hungry some of the time. So doing this practice meant that my body and my psyche were already comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortably hungry. For some folks who don't experience that regularly, it can put you into a bit of a panic and it can freak out your body. But when you're used to it, your body's like, oh, this thing again, being uncomfortably hungry. We've got this, no problem. No need to panic, it's fine. So I feel like that was a huge benefit to me in my time out. Also, when I first got back from boot camp and it was looking very likely that I was going to be heading out on alone, I did a ketogenic diet on purpose for about a week and a half. So I cut all carbohydrates out of my body and focused mostly on green vegetables without carbohydrates and meats and fat, healthy fats. So in that way, not only did the intermittent fasting get me used to ketosis, but the ketosis itself meant that my body was like, oh yeah, this thing, no problem. So both of those things I felt served me really well, and maybe even to the degree that I was too comfortable with being hungry. It took me a while to really key in on how the toll that it was taking from my body to be so hungry for so long. But in general, yes, I would absolutely say that those practices were really, really helpful for me. One of the other things that I was doing before I went out for my physical prep was I was seeing a personal trainer. So I do a lot of physical activity. I'm a pretty physical person and I like working out and I like running and riding my bike. But before I went out last summer, I was certainly trying to pack on extra pounds. At the same time, I didn't want to do that while being unfit. So I went to see a personal trainer because I felt like I could use, one, help really building exactly the muscles that were going to be most important for me out there and putting on extra mass in the form of muscle as well as fat, but also doing it in a way where I wasn't burning a lot of calories and losing a lot of weight. So I did see someone for several months and it was super helpful, and one of the main things we worked on was core strength and stability, because I wanted to make sure that no matter what, I was going to be really like strong and fit in a grounded way so that I wasn't going to be having, stumbling or balance issues as I started to get weaker and weaker. And then of course the other key thing was practicing a lot so that I was going to be very strong for pulling my bow. So a 45-pound bow is fairly strong poundage for a person my size, certainly doable, but I also knew that I might be losing strength. So I wanted to be sure that I went out there super strong so that even as I lost a lot of strength potentially, I was still going to be strong enough to pull that bow. And that was true. That was, I think, a really, really good practice for me and a good way to have spent my time and energy before going, because I remained really strong the whole time out there. I could pull that 45-pound bow until the very last day. Mind you, within the last month or so, when I was really aware of it was the last couple of weeks, but my aim definitely went downhill and wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I was losing some of those like smaller, real aim specific muscles, but my overall strength stayed really good. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to still be able to pull my bow given how skinny I had gotten and how much weight I had lost overall. So super, super key. And then of course the packing on weight, which was hard. That honestly felt like one of the hardest things that I did in preparation, because making my body eat more than it wanted to and things that it doesn't generally eat was really hard. And sometimes it made me feel a little bit ill. And I ended up backing off on it a little bit, because there were enough times where I kind of pushed myself and then it came right through, or I just felt generally unwell. And I was like, you know what? Yes, I want to go in there carrying as many extra calories as I can, but I don't want to do it at the sake of my health. So I ended up, my goal was to put on as much weight as I could. I thought that might be in the 20 to 30 pound range, and it ended up being 20 pounds because that just felt like the limit of what didn't make me feel awful. So that was the best I could do. And as it turned out, I ran through that extra weight really quickly. And so this was kind of an interesting thing, because the advice of one of the folks on the show was and this is not someone who is a participant, but someone who is one of the survival experts kind of consulting and helping check us out and doing some of the medical stuff when we're out there. his advice before we went in that week before launch was, putting on extra weight isn't necessarily a really good idea, because one of the things they're looking for is overall weight loss. And even if it's extra weight, losing a ton of weight is really traumatic on your body. Even if it's weight you haven't been carrying very long, it's that total overall weight loss and not just what your base body weight is that they're looking at and that your body is registering. So I still feel like that was good for me, but I do have curiosity about what it would have looked like if I hadn't put on quite so much weight and just went more like what my normal weight is. I think that I probably wouldn't have lasted as long, frankly, but also I would have had a less dramatic drop, and maybe that would have been better for me. It's really hard to say. That said, Nikki didn't put on nearly as much weight as the rest of us, and she got pulled a lot earlier for being underweight, right? I was out there 3+ weeks longer than her, and I think part of that was that extra weight that I put on. So overall, I feel really good about the preparations that I did before going. I feel like they were right on, and I feel like they served me super well out there. So I would recommend all of those practices that I did. And, the combination of those things and my own natural strength and resiliency, which I feel like I've always been a fairly, physically capable, well, when I was very young, actually, I was more of a bookworm and not very sporty or in my body. So I don't want to say always, but since like my teenage years, I've felt pretty strong and capable in my body. So that said, I think that just my nature served me well. But all of the other things that I do, I absolutely recommend them to people. So the combination of my natural physical being and resiliency and capacity to really push myself, and all of those preparations that I did. And then my attitude was huge. Being comfortable with discomfort and still looking for something to be grateful in all of it, and being so engaged with the place that I was in such a loving way, and staying positive in all of my practices, the singing, the dancing, and the gratitude, and the ancestor offerings. I think all of those are part of why I did so well physically. I was buoyed up by something other than calories out there. That was really big. So cultivating those relationships and that way of being before going out, that's a really important practice if you know you're going to be in a survival situation. And then the final thing, of course, is really listening to my body. And I think the fact that I was ignoring my body a bit for a while, but at the very end, I got those deep intuitive hits that I was reaching the point where things were starting to go downhill, and I chose to listen to that. And I don't know if I would have, had there not been this crux situation, which was my birthday, and thinking a lot about my birthday and what that meant to be and what I wanted to give myself. Had that not been happening, I might have pushed through, and maybe I wouldn't have snapped back to health the way I did. But those things, as well as my physical preparation, served me super, super well, and I would recommend them to anyone.